London Bridge is down. Elizabeth II, a 96-year-old Queen of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth countries, is dead. She has left the throne to her son, Charles III, the guy that I would put in the meme where he chases someone. Well, usually children. Elizabeth II went down as the longest ruling monarch in British history. She was there to witness Britain recovering from World War II and also both leaving and entering the EU. She was born on the 21st of April 1926, which actually is the day after the 37th birthday of some Austrian painter. Her childhood was very typical for a princess. She loved horses and dogs and probably all sorts of other breathing animals, as children usually do. Other than being cute, little and innocent, she was supposedly very well behaved, responsible and had an air of authority, at least according to our boy Winston Churchill. Let's be clear about one thing. Elizabeth was never really supposed to be the queen. In fact, she was third in line to the throne behind her uncle Edward and father George. Long story short, her uncle, who was supposed to be the next king, abdicated after being crowned in 1936 to pursue more attractive targets in his life. The following year, Elizabeth's father was crowned king, and Lizzie, not having any brothers, became the next heir apparent. When World War II broke out, the future queen was evacuated to Balmoral Castle in Scotland, which, fun fact, is exactly the place where she died. The irony always catches up, huh? During the early years of the war, she would speak out publicly to improve the general morale of the people. And later, in 1945, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service in the British Armed Forces. She trained as a driver and a mechanic, becoming the first female member of the royal family to serve in the army. And even though she never was anywhere close to the front lines or any real danger, it definitely brought up the spirits of the general public to see even the royal family personally engaged in the war. Shortly after the war in 1947, the princess went on her first overseas tour too. Oh wait, nobody gives a shit. We all happen to know Prince Philip, right? The Queen's husband and the guy that looked dead 20 years before his actual death. Well, he first met the Queen as a young cadet at the Britannia Royal Naval College in 1939, and even though the young princess was 13 at the time and Philip was 18, and her second cousin, if that makes any difference, she apparently fell in love with him and would exchange love letters throughout the war years. I mean, I know those were different times, but like, bruh. Upon his return from the Pacific Theater in 1946, he's presumed to have proposed to his 21-year-old cousin, who at least now was of legal age. Of course, there were some controversies about the whole thing. Well, first of all, Philip's second name was Glucksberg, which sounds a little bit too German. Secondly, his sisters married German noblemen with Nazi links, which even now doesn't really make for a good PR. But in the end, he renounced his Greek and Danish titles, changed his surname to Mountbatten, which doesn't really sound much better, and everything was a-okay. So after all of that was settled, they finally got married in 1947 and had their first child, Prince Charles. Prince Anne in 1948, and 2 years later in 1950, Prince Andrew, the guy that was Epstein's friend, who we will talk about later in the video, and last but not least, Prince Edward. 5 years after they got married in 1952, Elizabeth's father, King George VI, decided to log off. So, at 25 years of age, she was coronated queen at Westminster Abbey in London. Right after coronation, she went on a tour around the world, traveling more than 40,000 miles, or 64,000 kilometers, for those viewers who don't have very limited mental capabilities. Queen Elizabeth II actually became the first ruling British monarch to visit Australia and New Zealand. She was also the most widely travelled head of state. Talking about taxpayer money, huh? Everything was going great. The British Empire continued its transformation into the Commonwealth of Nations and its decolonization efforts. But the Queen didn't really have any say in that, so we will not go into detail. So as I said, everything was going well until the notorious Annus Horribilis, Latin for horrible anus. In all seriousness though, it means horrible year. She did not get hemorrhoids or anything, as far as I know at least. The Republican feeling was on the rise. Her children were divorcing, a fire broke out in the Windsor Castle, and she was forced to pay income tax. Just imagine how horrible that is. And as the cherry on top of the cake, she had to sue the Sun for a copyright infringement after publishing her annual Christmas message 2 years earlier. Now, that truly sounds like Annus Horribilis to me. 5 years later, Princess Diana, 2 years after the divorce of Prince Charles, had suspiciously died in a car crash. Of course, that didn't just go about without any conspiracies. A former MI6 agent has claimed that Diana was being watched by the agency, and both her bodyguard and driver were supposedly on MI6 payroll, suggesting that a third party was involved in her mysterious death. Some sources also claim that a white Fiat Uno scratched Diana's vehicle moments before the disaster. What also didn't help was that an owner of one such car, who was also allegedly an MI6 agent, was found dead in his burned vehicle, with his head detached from his body, and this very gruesome death was ruled as suicide. Honestly, this topic is a rabbit hole way too wide to cover it properly. Without doing a separate video on it, I mean. Even the reptilian Lizzie the Lizard theory is much more on topic than this, so let's move on to things that are actually about the late monarch. Since the whole Diana incident, not much really happened in her life. Of course, except for her son Prince Andrew being accused of liking kids a little bit too much, and being friends with Jeffrey Epstein, but yeah, I mean, she had her diamond and platinum jubilee, got COVID, which she surprisingly survived, and she went to Balmoral Castle, and then decided to die at the ripe age of 96, setting Operation London Bridge in motion. You too could set something in motion, and that something is our two-man channel. So if you got this far into the video, then please consider leaving a like, leaving feedback in the comments, and subscribing, as it would greatly support our development. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and see you next time.